Hi, everybody. My name is Brian Wahika. I am an interdisciplinary studies major here at Texas Tech, and I did a research paper on regulations and technologies on fresh water. In that process, one thing that really caught my attention and caught my eye was a quote by Glennon that stated, "Americans can turn on a tap and an unlimitless amount of fresh water is available to them." It's hard to think that we have a limitless amount of water, because when I was doing that search, I found a quote by Glennick that also talks about how the world is covered 71% of water, but only 3.5 of it is actually fresh water, and only 1% is actually drinkable through conventional needs or conventional ways. With that being said, conventional ways can be like well water, irrigations, purification systems. Um, what makes it hard to believe that we have an unlimited amount of water from that 1%. And in that process, I came into contact with my disciplines of economics and relationship that help build that awareness and help build an understanding to find new ways of regulations and technologies that could be beneficial and create awareness and understanding to different parts of freshwater, not just for Americans, but for any other person or any other country that may not have access to unlimited amounts of water like we currently feel we do. One of my biggest things that I found is in a study that I did by Tortahana, in Singapore. He did a study that created awareness and understanding through a tier system and cost benefit analysis. What this cost benefit analysis does, it helps build a tier system and cost to the price of water depending on your situation and your economic standings. That also made it so where everybody had drinkable water, because before they would import a lot of their water through other countries, which made it to where not everybody had access to drinkable water because of its cost and because of how expensive it was to bring that import into the country. One of the biggest other things that I found is that they created a communicational system through managerial strategies in creating trainings for the people, where the people had more awareness and accountability through different aspects of trainings. These trainings could be anywhere from understanding how the filtration system worked and how the accountability of processing of people using water, as well as how much it costs for different aspects of water. But it was all through different approaches that the government was offering to bring accountability to the people. Building that accountability helped create awareness and understanding so that everybody knew what was being used, as well as giving everybody access to fresh, clean water. Tortajada talks about different benefits that can benefit and grow different policies, administrative strategies, and awareness to not just the people of Singapore, but also different surrounding communities and different parts of the world that can grow and understand, so that these policies and different aspects can be useful, not just for the people of Singapore, but for everywhere around the world. One of my biggest things that I say that I came to the effects that I have created or learned from is when I did a travel to Mexico on leisure, and I was sitting there eating, and I had to watch this young kid travel about a football field just to get clean water, which I found very intriguing. That somebody so close and so close to home, our neighbors had to worry about getting fresh water so close. And that's when I also kind of tied into different technologies and regulations that kind of also played off of different aspects of Africa, learning that different places in Africa had to travel days, days, to get fresh water. This came from different approaches and talks with different customers that do missionary works that they talk to me about, that they have to do days in Africa or different parts of different areas that are poverty stricken, that don't have clean water or don't have access to the technologies to give them clean water, and different regulations. Also, their economic standings, they don't have any way of doing irrigation systems or wells to give them fresh water. This ties into the different technologies that become viable, into finding different ways to make that 1% more accessible to different people, or even ways to make that the other 2.5% viable to people. This is where technologies come into effect and different economic approaches come in to make it a little bit more cost benefit. One of the biggest things I came into effect to was a TED talk by by Michael Pritchett, which is an engineer. He was one day trying to figure out why it took so long for a disaster-stricken area like people from Katrina to get fresh water or basic necessities, to be able to have clean water to drink. This came into his technologies of nanotechnology. This nanotechnology was so advanced that it was able to purify water at a micro level so that viruses and bacteria would not be able to be accessible to people so they could have fresh water, no matter their situation, even if it was a poverty-stricken area or an economic standing. He did it not just because of the situation, but he did it for it to be able to be access to everybody. What technologies does, it allows people to bring different approaches and awareness, as well as different approaches in finding solutions to access fresh water that may not have been accessible to before. One of the biggest things that I found from technologies is the importance in longevity of technologies and regulations is to build on the concepts and theories of growing and understanding different and growing new insights to the complex issues of regulations and technologies, and to build from economics and organizational leadership to build on growing understanding. What economics tends to looks at different branches as a whole, looks at the world as different structures that branch and weave together, different aspects of longevity that can build and be able to grow different forms of cost benefit that we can try to use and develop so we can access that other 2.5% of drinking water, or maybe in the future to the other 71% of that drinking water. Finding different approaches and understandings and growth allows economics to incorporate different approaches of studies such as numerical data, policy changes and regulations, conflicting inputs and outputs of supply and demand. With those different outputs of supply and demand, we can learn to find different approaches, like in Singapore, how cost-benefit analysis tied into different tier systems, and how people became communication awareness to what is being used and grown, are used and distributed throughout the entire people of Singapore. This also ties into my organizational leadership, which is a dialogue of subdisciplines in communication, managerial focus, and operational practices. What these subdisciplines do is build a sturdy foundation and connect to most disciplines so that complex issues similar to this regulations and technologies of fresh water can communicate more effectively and generate new ideas and insight so that leaderships can move things to fruition. If things can move to fruition, then new improvements and understandings can generate. What this discipline does also is build accountability to move things forward in a proper manner. What that does is it helps also kind of tie into the Singapore, where people were more held accountable for how water is being used and how everything is being regulated, and everything. With this all being said, Torta Hara did an excellent job in communicating and connecting the disciplines of economics and leadership from different ways in cost-benefit analysis and the different ways of holding people accountable through managerial strategies. The way he communicated things more effectively and processed things more effectively. This helped bring awarenesses to not just the people of Singapore, but also to different surrounding countries, and offer different insights and technologies that became viable. What the technologies also does is building from the organizational leadership and economic standpoint, it helps build different processes in fog harvesting, the lifesaver bottle, and nanotechnologies that can also be used throughout the entire world to offer different forms to people that are either poverty stricken or people that have disaster-stricken areas, kind of like where Pritchard did. He created that system from conflict of issues, people not having fresh water or access to fresh water because of what happened or surrounding areas, or their issues through economic standing. Building off of each of these perspectives of economics on your slip can also help improve how each discipline views the complex problem, and how we can find different connections and regulations and technologies so that we can find uh, ways for future generations to access that next 2.5% of clean water, or even the other 70% of clean water. We need to find new ways and stepping stones to process and try to eliminate this issue of fresh water being such a limited resource, while bringing in different forms of insights similar to economics and organizational leadership that can generate lasting effects.